Hey! Yo, everyone, Andrew here, bringing you another video review, and today we're going to be doing Batman and Robin. Batman and Robin Must Die. Take a look at this comic cover right here. Now, for the sake of this review, I am just going to be saying Batman and Robin Must Die or Must Die. There's no way I'm going to go through the whole entire review saying the full title as Batman and Robin Must Die. A little too repetitive for my blood. But with that said, Batman and Robin Must Die is the third volume in the Batman Robin series, in the final volume that has Grant Morrison as a writer. And as you would think, this ties up a lot of the loose ends that Grant Morrison has had in his Batman writing up to this point. Of course, Grant Morrison can't tie up the loose ends because then he wouldn't have anything untied to go into Batman Incorporated. So not everything is tied up into a nice neat package. It more or less looks like a package with a few torn holes on the side, the ribbon's kind of undone. You know what I mean. Anyways, there's basically two stories in this trade. There is the Batman and Robin Must Die story, which deals with their final confrontation with Dr. Hurt and also the return of Bruce Wayne. And then we have Batman The Return, which deals with the return of Bruce Wayne. You're going to find there's a lot of returning with Bruce Wayne, and I'll get into that a little bit more in the video. So, like I said, this continues the Batman and Robin story that Grant Morrison has been doing thus far. And last we left off, Joker is thrown back into the mix. Dr. Hurt is making his final moves to take over Gotham, bringing back some old enemies of Batman and Robin, and with the dynamic duo on the case, there's a little extra element that has been sprinkled on top. And what is that element? Well, it's the Batman. And I'm not talking about Dick Grayson as the Batman. No. I'm talking about the Batman. Bruce Wayne. Making his triumphant return back to action, punching, kicking, and nutshotting the bad guys all over town. So, the question is this. Is with the return of Bruce Wayne, does Batman and Robin really need to die? Will two Batmen be enough to take down Dr. Hurt? Or will there be more of a loss here than a gain? You're just going to have to read and see. Let's get into the good, the bad, and whether or not you should get it. Good! Well, it's the return of Bruce Wayne. And more so than the actual return of the Bruce Wayne is the return of Bruce Wayne. A bit confused? Well, you can blame Grant Morrison for that. But see, in the return of Bruce Wayne, that story wasn't actually about the return of Bruce Wayne per se. I mean, metaphorically it was, because it was the return of Bruce Wayne as a persona. But it was more or less his journey back. It was more or less of what happened to Bruce while he was gone. When he came back, he just kind of stood there with his Batman cape and cowl. In this trade, we actually see Bruce Wayne return to action, which is basically the return of Bruce Wayne. This feels more of a return to action for Bruce Wayne than the return of Bruce Wayne. Again, a lot of returning of Bruce Wayne. Hey, I'm happy. He's returned. So it's good to see him back in action, particularly fighting up against Dr. Hurt, because seeing those two collide is beautiful. I mean, this is an individual that has been destroying Batman's life on a professional, personal, and, well, I don't know, spiritual level. We'll throw that in there, too. Dr. Hurt has just been attacking Batman any way, shape, or form. And then after Batman gets thrown back in time via the Omega Sanction, Dr. Hurt just starts running roughshod on everything. Seeing Bruce come back and finally get his hands on the evil Dr. Hurt, the devil himself, whatever you want to call him, it is just great. In addition to that, the writing in this is good. You know, I give Grant Morrison a lot of trouble for his dialogue sometimes, being very mechanical, but we really don't see that in this. The dialogue is actually pretty good. There are a few instances where the dialogue is kind of off. For example, when Bruce comes back and he's fighting with Dick and Damian, he says, "Damian, in a Robin costume, explain." That doesn't sound like something Bruce would say. Bruce would say something more like this. "Damian's Robin? Explain. We'll talk about it later. You better. Something more like that. I mean, seriously, he's the world's greatest detective. He couldn't figure out that while he was gone, Damian became Robin. Really? But putting an example like that aside, the writing in this was actually really good. It was fast paced, it kept the person captured, which is nice. Again, I do harp on Grant Morrison a lot, but that's because I like Grant Morrison. I want to see him do the best he can. He has his faults, and his faults are a little bit more noticeable than some people, but on the whole, he's a good writer, and you really see the writing in this. You also get Batman the Return, which deals with Bruce Wayne actually returning back into fold, putting on a new costume, establishing what Batman Inc. is going to be like. And that was probably my favorite issue out of this whole entire trade, because it's really the return of Bruce Wayne. This is him being back. This is him designing the new universe for Batman, how things are going to be done. It was just a good issue. And the art in it was pretty good too. It's probably some of the only art where the new costume looked good to me. The new costume's still growing on me. I don't know what it is. I guess it's just because there's not enough black to break it up. Like, for example, in the new costume, he doesn't have the underwear. I think the underwear would have been nice because then you have the black to break up the gray. That or just make the costume completely black and have the yellow bat symbol. That would be nice. But, hey, we can't have everything. In addition to that, I like in the back there's a sketch section, and I usually don't look at that extra feature stuff that's in trade paperbacks and hardcovers. People actually comment that I should bring it up a little bit more. Then I should, but I probably won't do it as much as people would think. But the sketch section is pretty nice because they actually go into detail why they did what they did with Batman's costume. Try to make it more practical, a little bit more sexy by Grant Morrison's words. Why he brought back the yellow shield and the belt buckle the way it is, and making the gauntlets a little bit more hardcore, or the boots a little bit different, or the ears. Kind of goes into detail on why the costume was changed for what it was. And it was a fun read. I mean, it was a small section, but it was a fun read. And like I said, the art in Batman The Return was good. It was nice art. It was enjoyable. There was a few instances where it looked a little off, but for the most part, the art looked good. Bad. Well, the one bad I can say is that the art in the actual Batman Robin stuff really didn't appeal to me that much. I know it's good for some people, and some people will enjoy giving it that kind of dark, nightmarish-like feel to the comic. But at times, I couldn't stop laughing on how some people were drawn. Particularly Professor Pig. And like Damian and Bruce and Dick when they had their cowls off. Like you see Bruce just grinning from ear to ear like this with his cowl off. It just looks silly. But maybe that's just me. I'm putting it in the bad category because it doesn't really help out the comic that much, at least in my opinion. But then again, art is really something that's judged by the reader. In my opinion, there's three things that can't be measured in life: music, art, and comedy. Because you could love some of the most ridiculous music in the world and some people could hate it, and vice versa. Some people think some art is absolutely gorgeous and unique, and some people would think it sucks. And you'll laugh at a joke some people just won't get. Again, I think you can't measure those three. But when it comes down to the comic itself, the art really doesn't help it as much as it could have. I would have liked actually Frank Quitely staying on the comic itself. I'm not the biggest Frank Quitely fan. His art has its ups and downs, but it worked well for the comic series. And in addition to that, the other reason why the art is in the bad section is towards the end of the book, in the final issue for Batman and Robin, they keep on switching back and forth between two artists, which just pissed me off. Because I didn't know when one story was ending and one story was beginning. Stick to one artist and don't jump around with two artists. I don't know why they do that. Maybe to give you a different feel for two sides of the story. Maybe give you a feel for Dick Grayson's story, and then give you a feel for Joker's story, give you a feel for Bruce's story. But it just shouldn't have been done at all. And lastly, there are a few loose ends left that need to be tied up. Now, I know that not everything was going to be tied up, but I would have liked to see a little bit more done with Dr. Hurt, a little bit more resolve with him, other than what happens with him and the Joker. I see Dr. Hurt being a great potential villain for Batman, as long as it's Grant Morrison writing him. Not to say anyone else couldn't write Dr. Hurt well, it's one of Grant Morrison's characters. But he's still kind of a cool villain that I can constantly see come into play, especially towards the end of Batman Inc. You know, when Grant finally wraps up everything he's going to do with Batman, I can see Dr. Hurt making one more return. On the whole, whether or not you should get it. Well, I'm going to be completely, utterly honest with you. Out of the 3 Batman and Robin trades that have been put out thus far, Batman and Robin Must Die has to be my favorite, with Volume 2 coming in second and Volume 1 coming in third. Maybe it's just the pure simple fact that Bruce Wayne is returning in this, but I also think it was a good show of writing. Grant Morrison didn't stumble and fall like he sometimes does. And it was fast paced, it kept me hooked, and it was a quick read, and it was enjoyable. On a whole, it was fun, and I enjoyed it. Is it the best technically out of the 3 volumes? I don't know. Volume 2 was very good, especially with the clues that they put down. And I would argue that the actual plotting in Volume 2 was better than Volume 3. But the fact that this had Bruce returning, the writing was probably better with dialogue, and just on a whole it had a good pacing to it. Volume 3, I'm going to say, is a little bit better. So I do recommend picking it up. The Batman Robin series is going to be in question, though, for me, because really, where do you go from here? Let's be completely honest. Grant Morrison did Batman Robin, the comic series, not to launch a new comic itself, but to continue his Batman story. Now Grant Morrison's off the title, where do we go with the comic from here? This had some great critical success. People loved this comic. But once you reach the top that is reached thus far, can it keep on going up? Can it be on level ground, or will the comic fall? I know there's been some new writers jumping on it. I heard some good stuff, actually. And Judd Winick is going to be jumping on the title, doing a story arc with Jason Todd. But whether or not this comic will actually have longevity is debatable, just for the pure simple fact that this was used more or less for Grant Morrison's story purposes, rather than to create a new Batman title. I would like to see this comic continue. I could very well see that the Batman comic distribution should be Bruce Wayne has Batman and Detective Comics, while Dick Grayson has Batman and Robin. Because, in my opinion, Dick Grayson, as great as a character he is, he works best when he's actually teamed up with people. On the Teen Titans, on the Justice League, and with Robin. That's not to say that Dick Grayson can't do well on his own. God, have any of you read Chuck Dixon's run on Nightwing? It was fan-fucking-tastic, borderline orgasmic, and he was alone in that. But the thing is I think Dick Grayson works really well when he's put on a team and he has to interact with people. He's not Bruce. He doesn't need to be grim and alone and that dark detective. He can be essentially the charismatic Batman. The Batman that goes around and works with people, particularly Robin. So, if they were to continue the Batman Robin title, I think this should be the exclusive title for Dick Grayson. As well with the Justice League if you want to keep him on that. But we're just going to have to wait and see if the Batman Robin title is going to have that longevity. I mean, will it be like Batman or Detective where it'll last for a long time? Or will it be like Shadow the Bat, will it last for a few years and then kind of just stop? Just going to have to wait and see. But on a whole, back to my final critique, this has been my favorite of the 3 volumes. It's had good dialogue, it's had a fast pace, and it was great because Bruce returned. The plotting was better in Volume 2, but I would still recommend this to Batman readers. And for you guys out there that are trying to get into modern Batman readings, I would recommend all 3 volumes because when you put them together on a whole, they work better. And that's kind of what happens with Grant Morrison's writing, is that individually the stories are good, but they're much better when they're on a whole. So, with that said, Batman and Robin Must Die. I just said both titles, blah blah blah, you should get this. Especially get the deluxe hardcore cover edition. Hardcore edition. That would be great. Hardcover edition. Why? Because you get that little extra in the back, which is fun. So with that said, I'm going to end this review here. This is Andrew saying peace out for now.